Why your grocery bill keeps going up even when you buy less there is a strange feeling that millions of Americans have experienced at the grocery store lately. You walk through the same aisles you have walked through for years. You pick up the same basics: eggs, milk, bread, chicken, vegetables, cereal, coffee, maybe a few snacks. But somehow, when you reach the checkout, the total looks completely different. You look inside the cart and think, that's it? The bags seem lighter, the cart seems emptier, yet the receipt is somehow longer and the bill is somehow higher. And that is where one of the most frustrating questions begins. How can Americans be buying less while still spending more? For many households, grocery shopping has stopped feeling like a normal weekly routine and started feeling like a financial calculation. You compare brands. You check the sale signs. You skip the expensive item. You put something back. You tell yourself you will cook more at home. You walk into the store with a list because you are determined not to overspend, and still, by the time you leave, you may have spent far more than you expected. The problem is not always that people suddenly became careless with money. Sometimes, the entire math of the shopping trip has changed. And the most interesting part is that the grocery bill does not have to explode overnight for people to feel the pressure. A few cents here, a dollar there, a slightly smaller package, a higher price on meat, a more expensive coffee, a larger utility bill for the store, higher transportation costs, higher labor costs, and suddenly the ordinary shopping trip that used to feel manageable starts eating a much larger piece of the paycheck. This is not simply a story about inflation. It is a story about what happens after prices rise, how Americans adapt, and why adapting does not always make the grocery bill fall. Because when people hear that inflation is slowing down, they often assume grocery prices should go back to what they were before. But that is not how prices work. Slower inflation does not necessarily mean cheaper groceries. It can simply mean that prices are increasing more slowly than before. And that difference matters. Because imagine a family that used to spend $150 on a weekly grocery trip. If the same basket gradually becomes $180, the family does not suddenly earn more money just because the economy says inflation is improving. They still have to pay $180. And if their rent, insurance, electricity, car expenses, and other bills have also increased, the grocery store becomes one more place where their paycheck gets squeezed. So today, we're going inside the American grocery cart not just to ask why food costs more, but to understand why buying less doesn't always solve the problem, why certain products seem to become more expensive than others, why smaller packages can make shoppers feel like they're being tricked, and why the modern American grocery trip has quietly become one of the biggest financial stress points in everyday life. The empty cart problem. Think about a normal American grocery trip. You walk into the store planning to spend maybe $100. You have a list. You tell yourself you're going to be disciplined. No unnecessary snacks. No expensive drinks. No random purchases. You pick up chicken. Then vegetables. Milk, bread, eggs, some cereal, coffee, maybe cheese. You look at the cart and it doesn't look full, but then you reach the checkout. The screen shows $127. You think, what did I even buy? This is one of the most frustrating parts of modern grocery shopping. The psychological connection between the amount of food you receive and the amount of money you spend has changed. A grocery cart that once looked like a substantial weekly supply can now feel like a collection of necessities. And that creates a strange situation. People are not necessarily buying luxury food. They are not filling their carts with expensive steaks and imported products. They are buying ordinary things. The problem is that ordinary things have become expensive enough that even small increases matter. If chicken costs a little more, eggs cost a little more, coffee costs a little more, bread costs a little more, and produce costs a little more, none of those individual increases may feel catastrophic. But your grocery bill doesn't care about individual increases. It adds them together. And that is where the pressure becomes real. The price you remember isn't the price you pay there is another reason grocery shopping feels so frustrating. Your brain remembers old prices. You may not remember exactly what you paid for an entire grocery trip 6 months ago, but you probably remember certain products. You remember when a dozen eggs felt cheap. You remember when a certain loaf of bread cost less. You remember when your favorite coffee was easier to justify. You remember when $50 could fill a noticeably larger portion of your cart. And every time you see the new price, your brain compares it with the old one. That creates what economists and consumers sometimes experience as a kind of price shock. Even if the price increase is relatively small on one item, seeing that increase repeatedly can make the entire shopping experience feel different. And there is something important to understand here. When a price rises, consumers often expect it to eventually come back down. But many price increases are not temporary. Once a business faces higher costs and raises its prices, it does not automatically reverse that decision just because inflation slows. So when someone says, inflation is coming down, so why are groceries still expensive? The answer is simple but easy to misunderstand. Lower inflation is not the same thing as lower prices. It can mean prices are rising more slowly. The grocery store can still be expensive. The package gets smaller now comes one of the most frustrating parts of modern shopping. Sometimes the price doesn't appear to change dramatically. Instead, the product changes. The box gets smaller. The bag contains less. The number of servings decreases. The package looks almost identical, but you are getting less product for roughly the same amount of money. This is commonly called shrinkflation. And from the customer's perspective, it can be difficult to notice. Imagine buying the same cereal you've purchased for years. The box looks familiar. The logo is familiar. The colors are familiar. The price might even look similar. But inside there may simply be less cereal. That means you're not necessarily paying more for the same amount. You may be paying roughly the same amount for less. And that's an important difference. Because if your family eats the same amount every week, you eventually have to buy the product more frequently. So even if the individual package doesn't look dramatically more expensive, your total spending can rise. You are effectively paying more to maintain the same lifestyle. And this happens across everyday products, snacks, household products, coffee, frozen foods, cereal, paper products, cleaning supplies. Sometimes the package changes. Sometimes the number of items inside changes. Sometimes the size changes. And sometimes the company simply changes the amount of product while keeping the overall appearance remarkably similar. The result? You walk out of the store wondering why your grocery budget isn't working anymore. The cheapest option isn't always cheap for years. One of the easiest pieces of financial advice was, buy the cheaper brand. And that's still useful. But there is a problem. The difference between the cheapest option and the next option may be much smaller than it used to be, and sometimes the cheapest option has become expensive too. Think about a family trying to reduce spending. They stop buying premium cereal. They choose the store brand. They stop buying expensive snacks. They choose generic. They buy cheaper cuts of meat. They purchase fewer prepared foods. They cook more. They use coupons. They look for sales. At some point, there is nowhere else to cut without changing what they eat. And this is where the grocery problem becomes more serious. You can reduce discretionary spending, but you cannot easily reduce necessities. A family still needs food. A child still needs breakfast. A working adult still needs lunch. A household still needs milk, vegetables, protein, bread, and other basics. You can buy less. You can substitute. You can delay a purchase. But eventually, you reach the bottom of the list. And when the necessities themselves are expensive, budgeting becomes much harder. Why meat can change the whole bill. One of the biggest decisions on a grocery trip is often protein. Chicken, beef, fish, eggs. And when these categories become more expensive, They can change the entire structure of a family's grocery budget. A family might try to solve the problem by buying less meat. Maybe instead of buying beef several times a week, they buy it once. Maybe they choose chicken more often. Maybe they add more beans, rice, pasta, or vegetables to meals. That can help. But there is another reality. When millions of consumers make the same substitutions, demand shifts. One product becomes more popular, while another becomes less popular. And grocery prices are influenced by a huge network of factors before the food ever reaches the shelf. The farmer, the feed, the weather, the processor, the packaging, the truck, the warehouse, the distributor, the grocery store. And finally, the customer. Your grocery bill is basically the final receipt from an enormous economic chain. You see one price. Behind that price are thousands of decisions. The cost you don't see. Imagine a carton of eggs sitting on a grocery shelf. You see eggs. But the grocery store sees an entire supply chain. Those eggs had to be produced. They had to be packaged. They had to be transported. They had to be stored. The store needs refrigeration. Employees need to be paid. The building needs electricity. The shelves need to be stocked. The company has to handle spoilage. And the store has operating costs. So when one part of that system becomes more expensive, the final price can be affected. This is why saying, "Why doesn't the grocery store just charge less?" is more complicated than it sounds. A grocery store is not operating in a vacuum. But that doesn't mean consumers have to accept every price increase without questioning it. Competition matters. Different stores have different pricing strategies. Some products are used as loss leaders. Some are heavily discounted to attract shoppers. Other products may carry higher margins, and that leads to another important part of the grocery experience. The price you see on the shelf is not always the entire strategy. Part 7, the store, is designed to make you walk into almost any major grocery store and notice what happens. You enter. You grab a cart. You see promotions. You see displays. You see products positioned at eye level. You see snacks near checkout. You see seasonal items. You see buy one, get one offers. You see giant signs saying sale. And suddenly, the shopping trip becomes more than buying food. It becomes a decision-making environment. The store wants you to buy what you came for. But it also wants you to buy things you didn't plan to buy. And Americans are not uniquely irresponsible for this. These stores are built around understanding consumer behavior. If you came in for milk and eggs but leave with drinks, snacks, a frozen meal, and something from the bakery, your grocery bill can increase without any single purchase feeling enormous. That's the dangerous part. A $3 purchase doesn't feel like a financial decision. Neither does $5. Neither does $7. But 10 small decisions can turn into $40. And when those purchases happen every week, the annual number becomes much larger. This is why a grocery budget can fail even when someone isn't making one huge mistake. Sometimes it's 100 tiny decisions. The "I'll just buy it here" problem there is another pressure Americans face. Convenience. Modern life is busy. People work long hours. Parents are taking children to school and activities. Workers commute. Students have schedules. Families are tired. And when you're exhausted, convenience becomes valuable. Maybe you buy pre-cut vegetables instead of preparing them yourself. Maybe you buy ready-made meals. Maybe you pick up a prepared chicken. Maybe you stop for groceries on the way home instead of comparing prices at multiple stores. None of these choices automatically make someone bad with money. Time has value. But convenience often comes with a price. And when almost every part of modern life is optimized for convenience, those small premiums can quietly become a significant part of a household's spending. That's why saving money on groceries isn't always as simple as just buy cheaper food. Sometimes the real challenge is balancing money against time. Why families feel the pressure more for a single person. Rising grocery prices are frustrating. For a family, they can become a much bigger problem. Imagine a household with 2 adults and 2 children. You can't simply cut every meal in half. Children still need food. School lunches still happen. Breakfast still happens. Dinner still happens. And unlike a luxury purchase, food is not something you can permanently eliminate from your budget. This is why grocery inflation can feel especially painful for middle-income households. They may earn too much to qualify for certain forms of assistance, but not enough to comfortably absorb every increase. They are stuck in the middle. Their income might look reasonable on paper, but after housing, transportation, insurance, utilities, healthcare, debt payments, and groceries, there may be surprisingly little left. And this creates a dangerous cycle. When grocery costs rise, people cut savings. When savings disappear, emergencies become harder. When an emergency happens, credit cards may become the backup. Then interest payments create another monthly expense. And suddenly, a grocery problem has turned into a debt problem. The most frustrating part: you adapt. But the target moves. This may be the biggest reason Americans feel exhausted by grocery prices. They adapt. They switch brands. They shop sales. They use coupons. They stop eating out. They cook at home. They buy in bulk. They compare stores. They make a list. They stop buying certain products. And yet the target keeps moving. The thing they considered affordable last year may no longer feel affordable. So they adapt again. This can create something more powerful than simple frustration. It creates financial fatigue. You become tired of checking prices, tired of comparing sizes, tired of wondering whether you're getting a good deal, tired of watching your total climb. And eventually, you may stop trying to optimize every purchase because constantly thinking about money is exhausting. That's when grocery shopping stops being just a financial problem. It becomes a mental burden. Why just make more money isn't the whole answer when people discuss financial problems. There is often one simple solution: make more money. And yes, earning more can absolutely help, but imagine someone gets a raise. Their income increases. Then their rent increases. Their insurance increases. Their car expenses increase. Their grocery bill increases. Their utilities increase. Their subscriptions increase. Their healthcare costs increase. Suddenly, the raise doesn't feel like the life-changing improvement they expected. This is why household finances are not simply about income. They're about the relationship between income and the cost of maintaining your life. If your income rises by 5% but your major expenses rise faster, you can still feel poor. That's the reality behind many Americans saying, "I'm making more money than I used to, but I don't feel better off." The paycheck grew, but the lifestyle became more expensive. What can actually help? So what can an American household realistically do? There is no magic grocery hack that will make every price return to the past. But there are ways to regain control. First, stop thinking only about the price of the package. Think about the price per unit. A larger package is not automatically cheaper. A sale is not automatically a good deal. A familiar brand is not automatically the best value. Compare the actual amount you're getting. Second, separate needs from convenience. If a prepared meal saves you an hour, it may genuinely be worth paying more sometimes. But if convenience products have become your default for every meal, the extra cost can become significant. Third, plan around flexible foods. Instead of deciding every dinner first and then buying ingredients, look at what's on sale and build meals around those products. And perhaps most importantly, don't treat grocery budgeting as a test of willpower. The goal isn't to become miserable. The goal is to spend intentionally. You don't need to eliminate every enjoyable food. You need to know which purchases actually matter to you and which ones happen simply because they are sitting in front of you. The grocery store is one of the few places where Americans can see the changing economy with their own eyes. You don't need an economics degree. You don't need to understand complicated financial markets. You simply need to walk into a supermarket with $100 and then try to buy what you bought before. That's when the numbers become personal. The real frustration isn't just that groceries cost more. It's that people have changed their behavior and still feel like they're losing. They buy fewer name brands. They buy smaller packages. They skip restaurants. They cook at home. They compare prices. They wait for sales. They cut things from the cart. And yet, at the checkout, the total still seems to climb. But there is an important lesson hidden inside all of this. Your grocery bill is not just a food bill. It is a reflection of your income, your time, your transportation costs, your housing situation, your family size, the supply chain, the economy, consumer behavior, and the decisions businesses make long before you ever walk through the automatic doors. And that's why the question isn't simply, why is food so expensive? The better question is, why does maintaining a normal life keep getting more expensive? Because when an American family buys less food but spends more money, the problem isn't always that they're buying too much. Sometimes, they're simply discovering that the definition of normal has become more expensive. And perhaps that's the most uncomfortable part. A smaller cart doesn't necessarily mean you're spending less. Sometimes, it means your money is buying less. And until that changes, Americans may continue walking out of grocery stores with fewer bags, longer receipts, and the same question, how did I spend this much on so little? Ending CTA added a smaller cart doesn't necessarily mean you're spending less. Sometimes it means your money is buying less. And until that changes, Americans may continue walking out of grocery stores with fewer bags, longer receipts, and the same question, how did I spend this much on so little? If this video helped you understand what's really happening behind your grocery bill, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more simple breakdowns of the money, prices, and economic changes affecting everyday Americans. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.